I told my daughter to stop watching influencers. Then one changed her life. The late afternoon sun, thick and golden, slanted through the living room window, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. It was the kind of light that usually soothed me, a gentle signal that the day was winding down, that a quiet evening with my daughter, Lily, was on the horizon. But today, the light felt accusatory, highlighting the mess Lily had made of the rug with spilled glitter glue and the general chaos that seemed to have become the permanent state of our home since she discovered the endless scroll of social media. My own quiet evening, I'd envisioned, involved a book and silence, not the relentless high-pitched chatter that seemed to emanate from her tablet. I'd been trying, for weeks, to rein it in. "Lily, honey, don't you think you've had enough screen time for today?" I'd ask, my voice already tinged with an impatience I tried to suppress. Her response was always the same, a mumbled, "Just 5 more minutes," or worse, a complete blank stare, her thumbs still furiously swiping, her eyes glazed over. It was like talking to a wall. I felt a familiar frustration prickle my skin. I'd always prided myself on being a present, engaged parent. We used to build elaborate blanket forts, paint colorful, messy masterpieces, and read stories for hours. Now her world seemed to exist within a glowing rectangle, populated by people I didn't know, peddling products I didn't understand, and creating a version of reality that felt utterly alien to me. The influencers, as she called them, were a constant presence. They were always so perfectly put together, their lives seemingly effortless, their smiles wide and unwavering. It felt like a performance, a carefully curated illusion, and I worried about the message it was sending my daughter. I worried about the unattainable standards, the constant pressure to consume, the erosion of genuine connection. I wanted her to value substance over superficiality, real-world experiences over virtual validation. My judgment was swift and absolute. This was a waste of her precious childhood, a distraction from what truly mattered. I saw it as a moral failing, not just on the part of the influencers, but on the part of my daughter for being so captivated by it all. It was a dangerous rabbit hole, and I felt a fierce, protective urge to pull her out, even if she resisted. This particular afternoon, the frustration boiled over. Lily was sprawled on the floor, giggling at something on her tablet, her face illuminated by the blue light. The glitter glue mess seemed to mock me. I'd had a long day at work, dealing with petty office politics and demanding clients, and the sight of her so engrossed in this seemingly frivolous world tipped me over the edge. I walked over and, without preamble, reached down and firmly took the tablet from her hands. The sudden silence was deafening, broken only by Lily's sharp intake of breath. Her head snapped up, her eyes wide with shock, then quickly filling with a hurt that I immediately regretted. The giggles vanished, replaced by a trembling lip. "Mom!" she exclaimed, her voice a mixture of disbelief and accusation. I stood there, the tablet in my hand, my own heart thudding with a mixture of guilt and a stubborn, misguided sense of righteousness. I'd made my point, I thought, but the look on her face was more than I could bear. It wasn't just disappointment, it was a profound sense of betrayal. In that moment, I saw not just a child who had lost her entertainment, but a young person who felt her mother's judgment keenly, who felt misunderstood and dismissed. The golden light seemed to dim, and a cold knot formed in my stomach. I had expected a tantrum, perhaps some tears, but not this quiet, devastating hurt. It was the look of someone whose world had just been abruptly and unfairly dismantled, and I was the one holding the hammer. This was the beginning of a rift, a chasm that had opened between us, and I knew, with a sinking certainty, that my impulsive act had consequences far beyond a few lost minutes of screen time. The silence that followed was a heavy, suffocating blanket. Lily didn't cry. Not outwardly. Instead, she simply stared at me. Her eyes, usually so bright and full of life, now clouded with a deep, unsettling sadness. It was a silence that screamed volumes, a testament to the unintended damage my quick judgment had inflicted. She slowly, deliberately, pushed herself up from the floor, her movements stiff and robotic, and walked out of the living room without another word. I heard the soft click of her bedroom door closing, a sound far more final than any argument. I was left standing there, the tablet feeling cold and inert in my hand, the glitter glue mess on the rug suddenly seeming like a monument to my own failure. My initial surge of righteous indignation had evaporated, replaced by a hollow ache in my chest. I had wanted to protect her, to steer her toward what I believed was a more meaningful path, but in my haste, I had trampled over her feelings, dismissing her interest and her joy. However misguided I believed them to be, the cinematic quality of the late afternoon light now seemed to mock my actions, casting long, distorted shadows that mirrored the growing distance between us. I walked over to the window, watching as Lily's silhouette appeared briefly in her own window, a small, solitary figure against the darkening sky. There was no anger in her posture, only a profound stillness that was more heartbreaking than any outburst could have been. I realized with a sickening lurch that I had not just taken away her tablet, I had taken away her trust. I had shown her that her mother's approval was conditional, dependent on her conforming to my narrow definition of what was acceptable. The ethical awakening I craved for her, I now saw, was something I desperately needed for myself. I had judged her experience, her engagement with this digital world, as shallow and worthless, without ever trying to understand it from her perspective. I had assumed the worst, projecting my own anxieties and values onto her innocent exploration. The influencers, whom I had so readily dismissed as purveyors of superficiality, were, in Lily's eyes, something else entirely. They were sources of inspiration, of connection, of a shared language that I had actively refused to learn. The conflict wasn't just in Lily's hurt. It was in my own internal struggle, the gnawing realization that my intentions, however pure, had led to an outcome that was deeply damaging. The consequence of my action was not a lesson learned, but a wound inflicted. I felt the weight of it pressing down on me. A heavy, tangible thing. The ease with which I had made my judgment now felt like a moral failing of my own. I had prioritized my own discomfort and preconceived notions over her emotional well-being. The spark of life that had been in her eyes moments before had been extinguished by my words, my actions. I had created a moral tension not just for her, but within myself, a stark contrast between the loving parent I aspired to be and the judgmental, dismissive person I had momentarily become. The tablet sat on the coffee table, a silent accuser. I knew I couldn't leave it like this. The damage was done, but the possibility of repair, however small, lay in acknowledging my mistake and making amends. The path forward wasn't about lecturing or explaining my rationale, but about demonstrating a genuine shift, a willingness to see the world and my daughter through a different lens. The silence in the house was no longer just an absence of noise. It was a palpable manifestation of the emotional fallout, a quiet testament to the consequences of a hasty, unfeeling judgment. Days bled into a week, each one a quiet testament to my misstep. Lily moved through the house like a ghost, her usual effervescence replaced by a subdued melancholy. She ate her meals in near silence, her eyes often downcast. Her responses to my tentative overtures brief and polite, devoid of the warmth that had once defined our interactions. The vibrant connection we'd shared had frayed, leaving behind a fragile, almost brittle politeness. I tried, subtly at first, to bridge the gap. I'd ask about her day, my voice softer, more hesitant than before, but her answers remained guarded, as if she were carefully curating her words, afraid of triggering another outburst. The tablet remained untouched, a silent, brooding presence on her dresser, a symbol of the conflict that had erupted between us. I saw her occasionally glance at it, a flicker of longing in her eyes, quickly suppressed. It was clear that my impulsive act had not only alienated her, but had also instilled a fear of expressing her interests, of being vulnerable with me. The consequences of my judgment were playing out in the quiet erosion of our bond, a slow, painful unraveling. I felt a constant, low-grade anxiety, a knot in my stomach that tightened every time I saw her withdrawn demeanor. The cinematic quality of our home, once a source of comfort, now felt sterile, filled with unspoken tension. I'd catch myself watching her, searching for a sign, a flicker of the girl she used to be, but finding only a shadow of her former self. My own internal conflict raged. I wrestled with the urge to apologize, to admit my mistake, but pride, that insidious serpent, whispered doubts. Would an apology be enough? Would it truly mend the hurt I had caused? Or would it be perceived as a weakness, an invitation for further manipulation? This internal debate, this moral tension, was exhausting. I was caught between the desire to reclaim our connection and the fear of appearing foolish or losing my parental authority. The ethical dilemma wasn't just about Lily's screen time anymore. It was about my own rigidity, my inability to embrace perspectives different from my own. I had demanded empathy from her, but offered none in return. I had judged her world without understanding it, and the consequences were a tangible, heartbreaking distance. The rhythm of our days had changed. The easy flow replaced by awkward pauses and carefully navigated conversations. The house, once filled with her laughter, now echoed with a quiet, shared disappointment. I longed for the days of blanket forts and storybooks, but I knew I couldn't force a return to the past. The present demanded a different approach, one that acknowledged the hurt and sought genuine reconciliation. My own ethical awakening was no longer a distant ideal. It was an immediate, pressing need. I had to find a way to show her, not tell her, that I was willing to change, to understand, to see her world through her eyes. The weight of my judgment was a heavy burden, and the path to redemption, I realized, would require more than just words. It would require action, a demonstrable shift in my own perspective. One rainy Saturday, the kind that kept you indoors and made the world outside feel distant and muffled, I found myself standing outside Lily's bedroom door. I'd spent the morning in a state of quiet contemplation, the rhythmic patter of rain against the window, a melancholic soundtrack to my thoughts. The tablet still sat on her dresser, untouched, a silent monument to our estrangement. The knot of anxiety in my stomach had tightened into a hard, cold ball. I couldn't bear the silence between us any longer. I knew an apology was necessary, but I also knew it had to be more than just words. It needed to be an act of genuine understanding, a tangible demonstration of my willingness to step into her world, however foreign it felt to me. Taking a deep breath, I gently pushed the door open. Lily was sitting at her desk, sketching in a notebook, her brow furrowed in concentration. She looked up, a flicker of surprise in her eyes, followed by a familiar guardedness. I walked in, my movements slow and deliberate, wanting to convey a sense of calm and respect. I sat down on the edge of her bed, the worn fabric familiar beneath my hands. The air in the room felt charged, thick with unspoken emotions. I started to speak, my voice a little rough, a little unsteady. "Lily," I began, I want to apologize. What I did last week, taking your tablet like that, it was wrong. It was impulsive, and it was hurtful, and I'm truly sorry." I paused, letting the words hang in the air, watching her face for any sign of softening. She didn't respond immediately, her gaze fixed on her notebook, but I saw a subtle shift, a slight relaxation in her shoulders. "I was so focused on what I thought was best," I continued, "that I forgot to see what was best for you. I judged your interests without trying to understand them, and that wasn't fair. I let my own ideas about what's important get in the way of seeing you, really seeing you." I looked down at my hands, feeling the weight of my admission. I was wrong to dismiss what brings you joy, even if I don't always understand it. And I'm sorry for making you feel like your interests weren't valid, or that I didn't trust you. The silence that followed was different this time. It wasn't heavy with unspoken accusations, but with a cautious hope. Lily finally looked up, her eyes meeting mine, and for the first time in days, I saw a flicker of something akin to curiosity, a tentative openness. She didn't say anything, but the guardedness in her expression had lessened. It was a small opening, a crack in the wall that had formed between us, and I knew I had to build on it. This was my crossing the threshold, my irrevocable commitment to trying, truly trying, to understand. The following afternoon, a Sunday, the rain had finally subsided, leaving behind a world washed clean and smelling of damp earth. Lily, emboldened by our conversation, hesitantly brought up the tablet again. "Mom," she said, her voice small, "there's this one influencer. She makes these amazing art tutorials. She's really talented, and she talks about how she learned everything by just practicing. I thought maybe..." Her voice trailed off, her gaze flickering towards me, seeking permission. seeking acceptance. I felt a surge of apprehension, the old judgment still lurking at the edges of my mind, but I pushed it down. This was my chance. "Okay," I said, my voice calm and steady. "Show me." A small, almost imperceptible smile touched her lips. She picked up the tablet, her fingers moving with a newfound confidence, and navigated to a specific channel, the screen filled with a vibrant, colorful display. A young woman, no older than 20, with bright, intelligent eyes and paint smudges on her cheeks, smiled warmly at the camera. She wasn't overly polished or perfectly manicured. Her enthusiasm felt genuine, her passion palpable. She began to demonstrate a technique for watercolor blending, her movements precise and fluid. Lily watched, mesmerized, leaning closer to the screen. I sat beside her, trying to quiet my inner critic, to truly observe. I noticed the way the artist explained her process, not just what she was doing, but why. She spoke of her own mistakes, her early struggles, her moments of doubt. She wasn't presenting a flawless facade. She was sharing a journey, a process of learning and growth. It was raw, it was real, and it was utterly captivating. I saw Lily's eyes light up, not with the vacant stare I had come to dread, but with a genuine spark of inspiration. She mimicked the artist's movements, her brow furrowed in concentration, her tongue peeking out from the corner of her mouth. She wasn't just passively consuming content. She was actively engaging, learning, creating. The artist's words about perseverance, about embracing imperfection, resonated deeply. It wasn't about achieving a perfect, unattainable ideal. It was about the messy, beautiful process of creation itself. I watched Lily, her face illuminated by the screen, her hands already reaching for her own sketchbook and pencils. The fear and apprehension I had felt earlier began to recede, replaced by a growing sense of wonder. This wasn't just about influencers. It was about finding inspiration in unexpected places, about the universal human drive to create and to learn. The artist on the screen wasn't peddling a false reality. She was sharing a passion, a skill, and a message of resilience. And in Lily's focused attention, in the way she eagerly began to sketch along, I saw the first seeds of my own ethical awakening, a realization that my judgment had been premature and deeply flawed. The hours that followed were filled with a quiet industry. Lily worked diligently, her tongue still peeking out in concentration, her brow furrowed as she tried to replicate the watercolor techniques she'd seen. I sat nearby, not hovering, but present, occasionally offering a word of encouragement or admiration for a particularly bold stroke of color. The initial tension had dissolved, replaced by a shared, comfortable silence punctuated by the gentle scratch of pencils on paper and the rustle of art supplies. The artist on the screen had become a silent mentor, her passion igniting a similar spark in my daughter. I observed Lily's process, not with the critical eye of a parent wanting perfection, but with the open curiosity of someone witnessing a genuine act of creation. She made mistakes, of course. A splash of color bled where it shouldn't have. A line wavered, an attempt at blending fell flat, but instead of frustration, I saw a quiet determination. She'd pause, study her work, and then, with a small shrug, continue, incorporating the mistake into the evolving piece, or simply starting a new section with renewed focus. It was a lesson in resilience, in embracing imperfection that I hadn't anticipated. The artist's message about the journey, not just the destination, was unfolding before my eyes. I saw Lily's initial eagerness morph into a deeper engagement, a quiet satisfaction in the act of making, of bringing something new into existence. The shame I had felt for my earlier judgment began to transform into a profound sense of humility. I had been so quick to condemn, so certain of my own superior understanding, that I had missed the genuine value Lily was finding. I had seen only the surface, the digital medium, and failed to recognize the underlying human impulse it was serving. This wasn't about escapism or superficiality. It was about connection, inspiration, and the fundamental human need to create. The artist, through her shared vulnerability and passion, had inadvertently become a catalyst for my own ethical awakening. She had shown me that inspiration can come from anywhere, and that judging someone's path without understanding it is a form of blindness. As the afternoon light began to fade, casting long, soft shadows across the room, Lily finally put down her pencils. She looked at her collection of sketches, a mix of tentative beginnings and more confident explorations, and a genuine smile spread across her face. It wasn't the bright, performative smile of the influencers, but a quiet, earned satisfaction. "I think," she said softly, looking at me, her eyes clear and bright, "I really like art." In that simple declaration, I heard more than just a newfound hobby. I heard a reclaiming of her own interests, a quiet assertion of her individuality that I had almost crushed. The reward wasn't a tangible prize, but the visible blossoming of her spirit, the quiet confidence that radiated from her. The days that followed were marked by a subtle but profound shift in our home. Lily still spent time with her tablet, but the frantic, all-consuming obsession had lessened. She approached it now with a discerning eye, seeking out the artists, the creators, the genuine voices that resonated with her. Her art supplies, once relegated to a dusty corner, were now spread across the kitchen table, a testament to her renewed passion. The air in the house felt lighter, the silence no longer heavy with unspoken tension, but filled with the quiet hum of creativity. I found myself watching her with a different gaze, one free from the fog of judgment and filled with a burgeoning respect. I saw the resilience she had cultivated, the quiet determination to learn and grow, not in response to external validation, but from an internal wellspring of passion. My own anxieties had begun to recede, replaced by a sense of quiet gratitude for the unexpected lesson. The road back to our former closeness wasn't a sudden, dramatic return, but a series of small, deliberate steps. We talked more, not about rules or restrictions, but about her art, about the artists she admired, about the challenges she was facing. I learned to listen without interrupting, to observe without judging, to appreciate the unique path she was forging. The scars of my hasty judgment remained, a subtle reminder of the damage that unexamined assumptions could inflict. But they also served as a constant prompt, a memento mori for my own tendency towards rigid thinking. The world, I was learning, was far more complex and nuanced than I had initially allowed myself to believe. The ethical awakening was not a singular event, but an ongoing process, a continuous unfolding of understanding. The consequences of my actions had been painful, but they had also been transformative, forcing me to confront my own biases and limitations. The artistic spark ignited by that one influencer had, in a way, reignited something within me too. I began to see the world through a less critical lens, to recognize the value in diverse forms of expression and connection. Lily, in turn, seemed to blossom. Her art became more confident, more expressive, reflecting a deeper understanding of her own voice and vision. She wasn't just mimicking, she was innovating, blending techniques, infusing her work with her own unique perspective. The initial encounter, the one that had triggered such conflict, had ultimately paved the way for a profound and lasting change. The lesson wasn't about the influencers themselves, but about the human need for inspiration, for connection, for the courage to create and to share one's journey, however imperfect. The quiet hum of creativity in our home had become a melody, a testament to a love that had weathered a storm and emerged stronger. And in the quiet spaces, a shared canvas began to bloom. The quiet hum of creativity in our home had become a melody, a testament to a love that had weathered a storm and emerged stronger. Lily, now immersed in her art, approached her tablet with a different intent. She wasn't scrolling aimlessly, seeking validation from an unseen audience, but actively researching techniques, studying the anatomical structures of mythical creatures for her drawings, and exploring digital art software. This shift was profound. It wasn't just about what she was consuming, but the purpose behind her engagement. She was no longer a passive recipient of curated content, but an active learner, a curious explorer seeking to deepen her understanding and hone her skills. This transformation revealed a crucial layer: the distinction between superficial engagement and purposeful learning. Consider how this applies when you witness someone deeply engrossed in a hobby, not for the applause, but for the sheer joy of mastery. The subtle difference lies in the internal motivation, the drive to understand, to improve, to push personal boundaries, rather than seeking external affirmation. Furthermore, this newfound purpose also reshaped her perception of the influencers themselves. She began to discern between those who offered genuine insight and those who merely presented an aspirational facade. Her focus shifted to artists who shared their creative process, their struggles, their evolution. She found inspiration in their vulnerability, their willingness to showcase the messiness of creation alongside the polished final product. This discernment is akin to a seasoned traveler learning to distinguish a genuine local eatery from a tourist trap. One nourishes the soul with authentic flavor, the other offers a fleeting, often bland imitation. Her ability to filter, to identify substance amidst the noise, was a testament to her developing critical thinking, a skill sharpened by her own pursuit of artistic excellence. Consequently, this discernment extended beyond her digital interactions. In her own creative endeavors, Lily became less concerned with the outcome and more invested in the process. She embraced experimentation, viewing mistakes not as failures, but as unexpected detours that could lead to unforeseen discoveries. If a brushstroke didn't land as intended, she wouldn't discard the piece. Instead, she'd find a way to integrate the anomaly, transforming it into a unique element of the composition. This echoes the resilience of a seasoned gardener, who, facing an unexpected frost, doesn't abandon their plot, but adapts their planting strategy, finding new ways to cultivate beauty and bounty in altered conditions. Conversely, my own perspective underwent a significant recalibration. I began to understand that the digital realm, much like any other medium, could be a powerful tool for learning and connection when approached with intentionality. My initial blanket condemnation had blinded me to the potential for growth and self-discovery that platforms like YouTube could offer, especially when guided by genuine passion. It's similar to a chef initially dismissing a new piece of equipment as a gimmick, only to later discover its capacity to revolutionize their culinary techniques. The tool itself is neutral. Its impact is determined by the skill and intent of the user. Building on this, I realized that my role as a parent was not to shield Lily from the complexities of the modern world, but to equip her with the discernment to navigate them. My earlier impulse had been to erect barriers, to isolate her from perceived influences. However, true guidance lies in fostering critical thinking, in encouraging her to question, to analyze, and to form her own informed opinions. This is akin to teaching a child to swim by guiding them into the water, providing a safety net, and offering instruction, rather than forbidding them from ever approaching the shore. The goal is empowerment, not avoidance. Another crucial layer is the subtle shift in our communication. Our conversations evolved from directive pronouncements and hesitant inquiries to genuine exchanges of ideas. I found myself asking Lily about her artistic choices, her inspirations, her challenges, not as an interrogator, but as a curious observer, eager to understand her world. This reciprocal curiosity fostered a deeper connection, a shared exploration, rather than a top-down transmission of knowledge. It's like two explorers charting unknown territory together, each contributing their unique observations and insights to build a more complete map. The subtle yet profound shift in Lily's engagement with digital content was not merely a superficial alteration. It represented a fundamental reorientation of her motivations. Her exploration of art tutorials evolved from passive consumption to an active, almost investigative pursuit. She began dissecting the visual language of the artists, not just admiring their finished pieces, but deconstructing the underlying principles of composition, color theory, and light. This mirrors the journey of a budding musician who moves beyond simply enjoying a symphony to meticulously studying the score, understanding the interplay of instruments and the composer's intent. The tablet transformed from a gateway to fleeting entertainment into a dynamic research tool, a digital atelier where she could dissect and absorb complex artistic concepts. This newfound intentionality also fostered a critical lens through which she evaluated the online personalities she followed. The superficial gloss of some influencers, once a source of passive fascination, now seemed transparent. She started to gravitate towards those who offered not just aspirational lifestyles, but tangible skills and genuine insights into their craft. It was akin to a discerning palate learning to distinguish a truly exceptional dish from one that merely looked appealing. She began to recognize the underlying craft, the years of practice, and the dedication that fueled the creators she admired, appreciating the substance beneath the curated surface. Furthermore, her own creative process underwent a metamorphosis. The fear of imperfection, which had previously held her back from bold experimentation, gradually receded. She embraced the inherent messiness of creation, viewing each deviation from her initial plan not as a failure, but as an opportunity for spontaneous innovation. This is reminiscent of a sculptor who, noticing an unexpected crack in the marble, doesn't discard the block, but skillfully incorporates the flaw, transforming it into a unique feature of the final form, adding character and depth. Consequently, my own parental approach underwent a significant evolution. My initial inclination to shield Lily from the perceived dangers of the digital world was replaced by a commitment to equipping her with the tools for discernment. Instead of building walls, I focused on fostering her ability to critically analyze and evaluate the information and influences she encountered. This parallels the wisdom of a seasoned mariner who teaches their apprentice not to fear the open sea, but to understand the currents, read the weather, and navigate with skill and foresight. This journey, initiated by a seemingly small act of digital consumption, had unexpectedly become a profound lesson in empathy. It revealed how easily we can project our own anxieties and expectations onto others, particularly our children, mistaking our own comfort zones for universal truths. The real awakening wasn't just Lily's artistic flourishing, but my own recalibration, my willingness to step outside my preconceived notions and truly see the world through another's eyes. It's a realization that echoes in the quiet moments, the understanding that true connection often lies not in shared opinions, but in the shared willingness to listen, to learn, and to adapt. The digital realm, much like any other space, holds both potential pitfalls and remarkable opportunities, and the key lies not in prohibition, but in fostering the discernment to navigate its complexities with wisdom and grace. The true practice begins now, not in grand pronouncements or sweeping reforms, but in the quiet, consistent effort to remain open, to question my own assumptions, and to celebrate the unique sparks that ignite passion in those I love. It's in the continued dialogue, the shared exploration, and the gentle encouragement that true growth is nurtured. The lessons learned here extend far beyond the confines of our living room, reminding us that empathy is not a destination, but a continuous journey, paved with moments of vulnerability, understanding, and the quiet courage to embrace the unexpected.